I just want to do a very, very brief introduction to Humanist Australia. Humanist Australia is a national organisation that was launched in December 2020 in response to the growing number of Australians who don't identify as religious and the emerging need to represent this group's interests and priorities on a broader scale. We are dedicated to helping people live ethical and meaningful lives through humanism. Through our ceremonies, educational resources, and awareness raising, we help non-religious people discover humanism and humanist values so that they can live an ethical life full of meaning and fulfillment. This evening's presentation and discussion are part of the educational and awareness raising practice. Now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Akiva Quinn. He's a regular presenter at these events. Akiva's first true love in the realm of ideas, that is philosophy, especially the sort of practical wisdom explored in applied ethics, moral, political and social theory, or praxis. He studied philosophy and sociology at Monash University and completed Master of Arts there in 2010. Akiva enjoys philosophy and literature with a focus on meaning and morality and has co-presented several workshops on life's purpose and meaning in life. His other training is in the discipline of computer science, and he works in software development where logic and reason also play key roles and meaning can be crafted as well. Which brings me to tonight's presentation. Akiva is going to be talking about the meaning in life, humanism and existentialism. He's going to make that connection. Humanism is a world view that embraces acceptance that as human beings, we do not have a fixed, essential, given or divinely ordained purpose and must therefore determine life aims for ourselves. Life purpose, goals, projects, and meaning in life must all be chosen by individuals and communities. Existentialism is a humanist philosophy highlighting the radical freedom at the core of human existence, which requires that we choose for ourselves how to live, what life projects are worth undertaking, and the activities, outlook, and values that will help us shape a meaningful life. Humanism and existentialism have crucial and profound, indeed foundational, insights to offer in the quest for the meaning of life. Please join us to explore these insights and questions about meaning in life together. And please note that the views expressed by speakers in our forums are their own and may not necessarily reflect the official position of Humanist Australia. And having said all that, over to you, Akiva. I'm looking forward to hearing what you've got to say.
Thank you so much, Vince. Thanks for the warm introduction, and thank you to our co-host as well, Les Allen, who's on the board of Humanist Australia, for hosting us tonight. I wanted to particularly thank each and every one of you. Some of you I've had discussions with before on this very topic, generally online, because that's often where we get the chance to meet, and some of you may be engaging with this topic or hearing some thoughts from myself for the first time. So doubly welcome if you haven't been along to a Humanist Australia forum before. I've got a few really quite simple things to say, and I thought I'd start off and just say them, and then I would do the de rigueur, meet the expectations of putting up slides and going through those. So I will be sharing some thoughts from quite a number of books, and one of them is a book by Sarah Bakewell. I'll give you the reference in due course. But her opening chapter actually says, what is humanism? It's about connection. So really enjoyed the detail that Vince shared with us before about the aims and the purpose and the raison d'etre, the reason for existence of Humanist Australia. And humanism, in a sense, it's about connection. So I'm going to be putting up slides, as I said, and there'll be a period where I can't really see you very well, but you may be able to see each other. And perhaps for afterwards, you'll notice I've put MEL as in Melbourne, if you wish to, because one way of connecting is knowing the geography of our fellow participants in tonight's conversation. I hope it will be a conversation. I'm going to talk for a while. I'll try and get through my material, but then I really would very much look forward to a conversation. If you choose to, there's an option in Zoom where you can click on the three dots next to your video and you can rename yourself. I'm not suggesting you adopt a new name at this very moment, but you could add what city or indeed what country as you like, if you wish to. It might be interesting for connection afterwards. So that may simply serve, if you want to do it, you're welcome to. It may simply serve to underscore that humanism is about connection. I'll explain when I get into the body of the talk what I would suggest existentialism is about. And again, I'll just offer the personal biography by way of a starting point that for me, existentialism for the 30 years or so that I've been reasonably familiar with the body of work, and humanism probably for longer, although I may not have called it that in my own mind when embracing the values of, care and concern and connection and human equality that are embraced by humanism. But both of those effectively are a core part of my philosophy of life. And I'll introduce something regarding some writers as well who write and think about and talk about philosophy of life. So for me, the two are rather intertwined. I'll explain in the next 40 minutes or so in a bit more detail kind of why they're quite linked for me. You can certainly be a humanist without being an existentialist. I will argue that existentialists effectively are humanists. It's just a specific approach to the topic. The only other thing I wanted to say by way of introduction before formally launching into sort of a presentation is that if you're here tonight for a discussion about meaning in life, terrific. If you're interested in the good life or living an ethical life, I just wanted to mention at the outset that for me, those three are largely equivalent. So in the past, a few of us have done presentations on meaning in life and then have followed up with presentations on the good life. Humanist Australia has, if you look at the YouTube channel and so on, a number of discussions on the good life, I think, already, or there have been sessions on that. So those are two kind of broad thoughts regarding connection, regarding the interconnection basically between the good life, the ethical life, and meaning in life. I will share my screen and provide you a bit of more detail to go along with those ideas. All right. So that's our topic for tonight, meaning in life through the prism, if you like, of humanism and existentialism. You've heard the outline of the topic of the presentation, so I won't go through that again. Okay, to make the link explicit between meaning in life and humanism, and indeed Humanists Australia, I would just like to start with a quote from Humanists International, which is the umbrella organization, which states, "Humanism is a rational, non-religious approach to life. Humanists strive to lead fulfilling, meaningful, and ethical lives using reason and empathy to guide them. Similarly, Humanists Australia on the website, humanism is a way of life that provides meaning and fulfillment without religion. So the centrality of meaning is entirely apparent, and I'm pleased for the opportunity to link meaning in life to humanism and indeed to existentialism. What I'll do in the next little while is cover meaning, purpose in life, link it to humanism, as I just said, make the link explicit between meaning in life and ethical action. So certain things which might give one pleasure if one's a moral fanatic or amoral or immoral in some ways, I would argue don't equate to a meaningful and purposeful and worthwhile life. I'll talk about existentialism and absurdity, and overall, the main point, if you're wanting to have a little break from listening, the main point, which I will make a few times, is that meaning in life is all about personal responsibility. Then we'll have time for questions and look forward to hearing your views for sure. To drill into that a little bit more, what we have is there was an earlier version of the Amsterdam Declaration, which was then updated in 2022, and it again highlights the centrality of meaning and purpose to a humanist worldview. So humanism meets the widespread demand for a source of meaning and purpose to stand as an alternative to dogmatic religion, authoritarian nationalism, tribal sectarianism, and selfish nihilism. We'll cover some of that this evening in terms of the contrasts. And then Humanists Australia again, in fact, Vince read out as part of the Charter of Humanists Australia precisely the sentence, "We are dedicated to helping people live ethical and meaningful lives through humanism." And the byline for Humanists Australia from the website, "Helping people lead compassionate, ethical, and fulfilling lives without religion." So the link between humanism, meaning, and purpose in life is hopefully more than apparent. To cover some of the key thinkers within the realm of humanism, but equally Friedrich Nietzsche is a foundational thinker within the existentialist movement. So we can count him as an inspiration in terms of both threads or both areas of thought. So Nietzsche says, "We have to answer for our existence to ourselves and will therefore be our own true pilots and not admit that our existence is random or pointless." So many people, colloquially at least, are familiar with the notion of an existential crisis or existential uncertainty. And really what Nietzsche is highlighting is the sense of randomness or pointlessness in life is perhaps a perfectly natural human response to what life is, or the fact that it doesn't have a given or fixed or predetermined or divinely ordained purpose. But we can answer that question. We can answer for our existence and be our own true pilots. So that's the point about personal responsibility. It's all up to you. That's why I particularly look forward to the discussion, because I'm interested in what you figure out in terms of meaning, purpose, direction, projects, and the rest of it in your life. There's a beautiful little series of books, which is Life Lessons from Various Key Thinkers. This is one of them. Our values are the central concern in life. So notice the link there between purpose, meaning, and values, which is obviously in the realm of ethics or morality. Who and what do you love? What do you think is important? What do you give priority to and take seriously? Are perhaps among the questions. That's just paraphrasing from John Armstrong's description, and he, including the quote that I've included above, brings Nietzsche as a a helpful source to help us answer those questions. Continuing again, I'm going to borrow from a thinker I particularly like, French existentialist, but at this stage in his career, at least equally a humanist, Jean-Paul Sartre. And the book is called, you can see there, Existentialism is a Humanism. So he's suggesting at least a belonging of the one tradition within a broader tradition, and humanism, I think, correctly would be understood as the broader tradition, which existentialism is one exemplar of. So Sartre writes, "We are left alone and without excuse. Man is condemned to be free. Condemned because he did not create himself, yet nonetheless free, because once cast into the world, he is responsible for everything he does." Apologies for the reference to man and the masculine pronouns, but that's how people wrote some 50 or 70 years ago. So I'm just quoting what he said. Humans are realized via transcendence and subjectivity. Basically, without going into a whole lot of detail, the existentialists talk about the factual circumstances or the physical realities of our lives. They refer that to as facticity, and basically our ability to move beyond that is what they refer to as transcendence. It's not transcendence, yes. It's not a supernatural concept at all in a humanist or in a existentialist frame. And subjectivity is reasonably clear. It just means that we are the point of departure, much like the quote that I brought just before from Nietzsche. This is humanism, because we remind man that there is no legislator other than himself, and that he must, in his abandoned state, make his own choices. So the call is clear like a clarion in the night to each of us to take up the challenge. It's a humanist challenge, it's an existentialist challenge, it's just an unavoidable challenge in life unless one embraces a supernatural worldview where there might actually be a cosmic meaning for life in general. There's a meaning of life, arguably. You'll notice I'm hopefully consistent in always referring to meaning in life, because I, like many of the thinkers in this tradition, will reject the notion that there is a meaning of life for all people in all cases. In fact, on exactly that point, another beautiful but rather large book on meaning in life is a collection, an anthology called Exploring the Meaning of Life. And in the introductory comments there, we get the notion that naturalism and humanism is a naturalism. In other words, it rejects the supernatural. That's all that a naturalism means. And therefore, naturalism, both objective and subjective, rejects the claim that God is necessary to secure a meaningful life. In the same anthology, which I'm quoting here from, there are sections which say that God is necessary to secure a meaningful life, but that's not the humanist or indeed the secular existentialist point of view. There is an option within existentialism to be a religious existentialist, but that's mostly not what we're talking about here. A slightly longer quote, but there is another option for meaning, which is to look only within life itself. This is the immanent option. What that means is it's immediately apparent to you. It doesn't require a leap of faith or any supernatural notions. It's accessible to you. This is the immanent option. It is content with the everyday. There's sufficient meaning for human beings in the human world. There's no such thing as the meaning of life, but there can be many meanings within a life. So thank you to Simon Blackburn, who's quoted in Exploring the Meaning of Life, for, I think, quite succinctly expressing what I was trying to explain just before. Continuing with Humanism and Meaning in Life. This is a beautiful book. Thank you, Les, for introducing me to it via Humanists UK. Some excellent resources along with Humanists Australia from their website. And this is a rather small and easy to sample book, which is quite a lot of fun to read. The Little Book of Humanism by Copson and Roberts there. And here's just someone that they quote, who was a former president, it seems, of Humanists UK. The meaning of life is to live it as wholly as we can, as abundantly as we can, here and now, sharing the experience with others, caring for others as we care for ourselves, and accepting our responsibility for leaving the world better than we found it. That latter part, just to give you my reflections on it, the last bit about leaving the world better than we found it, may seem like a difficult or burdensome task, but I guess even within one's own small world, within one's own community, family, etc., if one can achieve that, a kind of act local, think global logic, I think we probably can all at least aspire to that, whether we achieve great things locally or small things in a less local context. I wanted to just briefly indicate how broad and deep, how long and wide the history of humanism is, without trying to tell that history right now. So a pretty contemporary American philosopher by the name of Susan Wolf, who I've really enjoyed reading on a number of topics over the years, including meaning, says, meaning arises when subjective attraction meets objective attractiveness. That is, meaning comes from active engagement in projects of worth. There's a lot going on. She's got a whole book about meaning in life and why it matters. In summary, we want to bring out the point that there's a subjective element. It's about you and what you will find meaningful. But there's something, let's call it intersubjective. There's something about you in relationship to others that matters in terms of what projects will have worth. In a longer discussion, or when you're asking questions, if you want to pick up on this point, it's worth considering whether a life of organizing your paper clips, from smallest to largest and putting them into collections based on their color or their age would be meaningful. You might enjoy that for some strange reason, or you could think of slightly less ridiculous hobbies than that one. But would something that simply gives you some comfort and pleasure and enjoyment necessarily be worthwhile? And that's kind of the notion of there would be some objective elements. It's said by Susan Wolf in terms of what's meaningful. Then just again to show the breadth, in the part of the world that I'm from, Southern Africa, Desmond Tutu, who was involved, Archbishop Desmond Tutu was involved in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa after the apartheid era, which was all about re-establishing connection between people, because apartheid obviously rather damaged, destroyed some of those connections, to put it mildly. So there's a notion of Ubuntu. A person is a person through other people. So we only really human because of our connection to other human beings. To show that the same or very similar concepts exist in, entirely disparate cultures, coming from Chinese thinkers. We've got Kongzi, or Confucius as he's called in the West, talking about Ren, or simply translated as humanity, which is expressed by a network of reciprocity between people. So we have very similar notions, and all of those underlie the moral and social and personal value of humanism. I offered the summary of my entire talk as being about connection as a defining characteristic and core value of humanism. And here it is. If you can see well, you won't see it from me because you can see it on the screen, but this is the 2023 Sarah Bakewell Humanly Possible book. It's quite lengthy. I haven't been through all of it just yet, but some beautiful quotes and some beautiful ideas. And she really tells the story of humanists, individual people over 700 years, mainly in a European context, just because she has to contain the story somehow, but how those people express humanist values. For example, an American freethinker, in other words, humanist, from the 19th century, Robert Ingersoll, says, "Happiness is the only good. The time to be happy is now. The place to be happy is here. The way to be happy is to make others so." As good a creed, not that humanism is especially interested in creeds, because it does encourage, free thinking, and there's many different ways to this sort of truth. But that's a pretty workable creed. Very grateful to Sarah Bakewell and others who write in this field for sharing that with us. She then says, "The meaning of our lives is to be found in our connections and bonds with each other." And she quotes E.M. Forster, a novelist, who basically says, "Only connect." So that really is the central theme of, a good life, a meaningful life, a purposeful life, and a humanist life. Switching to the other part of the topic, you'll see hopefully a continuity, and I've already mentioned existentialism several times, and I've already mentioned this gentleman, Jean-Paul Sartre, and some of his writing includes these ideas. Everything that exists, including us human beings, does so without necessity or reason. So there's nothing in the universe that requires that human beings exist. So that means it's kind of up to us to work out, now that we do exist, as we're thrown into existence, as the various existentialist writers say, we now need to figure out what next. There is no design or rationale, either human or divine, for existence. And by existence here, deliberately capitalized, it just means existence in general, including human existence. No design, no rationale. There's Vince, Dieter, just people happen to be able to see on the screen at the moment. Whatever rocks your boat. And each of you who are listening in, live or perhaps on a recording, again, you get to figure it out. Doesn't mean there aren't better and less good choices, but there is no design or rationale which says this is what you must do because you exist. Existence is, as we're going to finish up with on this slide, contingent. That means the opposite of necessary. It means it's up to you, which is a point we've made a few times already. I talked about angst or anguish or uncertainty or existential crisis. And I would encourage, if people are particularly interested or sufficiently interested, to read Jean-Paul Sartre, very famous philosophical novel. He actually wrote this before some of the writings which I've been quoting from, called Nausea or Nausea in French, I think. And what does that mean? Let me read it and then I'll try and explain it a bit more. I understood the nausea. I possessed it. To tell the truth, I did not formulate my discoveries to myself, but I think that now it would be easy for me to put them in words. The essential thing is contingency. I mean that one cannot define existence as necessity. To exist is simply to be there. To give you more of a feel, he describes, his lead character moving through a town and finding himself disengaged and seeing trees and other forms and people and just being a little bit uncertain as to their reality or his own place within reality. Another novel in the same sort of style is The Outsider or The Stranger by Albert Camus. And there he describes, my mother died yesterday, or maybe it was the day before. And so there's a certain level of detachment. Camus, I'm slightly complicating things, but I'll throw it in anyway. Camus is sort of describing an absurdist worldview, but the connection between that and nausea or uncertainty about existence is just that if you allow yourself to think in that way, you can't be so sure about a lot of the things which, we're all socialized to just get on with our lives and to try and make sense of things as we go. This is introducing the notion of uncertainty. But anyway, read more or ask more if you want to get some sense of what those authors, Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus, sort of have in mind with this sort of a style of writing. They want to give you a sense of the experience of uncertainty or absurdity. I'll move through this fairly quickly because I've been talking for a while already. So meaning in life from an existentialist point of view, atheist existentialist, remember we said there is the possibility of being a religious existentialist as well. So along with the religious existentialists have the common view that in the belief that existence precedes essence, or that subjectivity must be our point of departure. So this is a little bit complicated, but just briefly, if our essence is to worship God, or our essence is to be kind, or our essence is to be warriors, then you already know who you are and what you should do in your life, and meaning in life, purpose, etc., is already largely defined because you started off with that essence, that's your belief system, and then how you exist follows from that. Existence precedes, essence means exactly the opposite. First you exist, we're thrown into existence, we, gain more understanding as we are brought up by our parents or others, and then we have to work out from a subjective point of view how to live. To try and explain that further, while the essence of a paper knife or a book, given they serve a specific purpose, do precede their existence, humans have no fixed meaning or purpose in life. We are thrown into existence. Man is nothing other than what he makes of himself. So when we publish a book with lots of interesting or fun ideas or recipes, whatever it might be, the purpose is already clear. So the essence of a recipe book is to convey information about how to make healthy and enjoyable meals. Human beings, again, the opposite of that. We don't have an essence. We start off with existence, and then we have to work out what's next from there. Just briefly, because I did mention Albert Camus before, he was a contemporary of Sartre in France. Camus was actually from Algeria, but then he moved to France. Judging whether life is or is not worth living amounts to answering the fundamental question of philosophy. So I would paraphrase that, if you like, as the fundamental question for us as human beings is to judge whether life is or is not worth living. Or if you're hopefully positive and optimistic, we talked about optimistic naturalism before, then it's not so much a question of if, but how. How is your life most worth living? And that equally is the fundamental question of human existence. Camus at that point, although he was a novelist as well, was writing philosophy in the myth of Sisyphus, and therefore he put it as a fundamental question of philosophy. The absurd is born of this confrontation between the human need, nostalgia for reason and longing for happiness, and the unreasonable silence of the world. Again, there's a lot in there, and reading The Myth of Sisyphus, which is actually quite a short book, is probably highly recommended if you haven't had the chance yet. But effectively, he's saying human beings are not absurd. The world is not absurd. It's the relationship between the two. We are the meaning creator. We kind of seek, yearn for, want meaning in our lives, and yet the world responds with an unreasonable silence. If you've ever gone outside or looked at the stars and looked for an explicit answer to the question of meaning in your life, I'm assuming much like me, you may draw inspiration from wherever you are, but you don't get a well-reasoned or verbalized answer from the universe or from any part of it. Just to continue briefly with the myth of Sisyphus, there is no sun without shadow, and it is essential to know the night. If there is a personal fate, there is no higher destiny. At that subtle moment when man glances backwards over his life, Sisyphus returning to his rock, he knows himself to be the master of his days. The struggle itself toward the heights, is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. I should mention, in case you're not familiar with the myth, it's a Greek myth, and our hero, anti-hero perhaps, if you like, Sisyphus here, upsets the gods, probably Zeus, and therefore he is condemned to forever rolling a rock, as you can see depicted there, up a hill. Surprisingly, unsurprisingly, the rock rolls down, he has to descend, and in that descent, Camus writes, is the moment of consciousness, of realization that we exist, and we can make sense even of burdens and repetitive tasks in life. For Sisyphus goes down the hill, picks up the rock again, and struggles back to the heights. And the key line for me is, one must imagine Sisyphus happy. Despite the toil, he is happy. This is his lot, and he's doing what he needs to, given his circumstances. Viktor Frankl, very well known in the meaning of life space, man's search for meaning. Ultimately, man should not ask what the meaning of his life is, but rather he must recognize that it is he who is asked. In a word, each man is questioned by life, and he can only answer to life by answering for his own life. To life, he can only respond by being responsible. Thus, logotherapy, which is Frankl's personal psychology, if you like, sees in responsibleness the very essence of human existence. So we need to chart our course, has been a consistent theme from the humanists and from the existentialists. My concluding remarks, and then very much look forward to discussion. Humanism and existentialism both hold that meaning in life is not determined or given, but is perforce, of necessity, a personal responsibility. To declare that existence is absurd is to deny that it can ever be given a meaning. But to say it is ambiguous is to assert that its meaning is never fixed, that it must be constantly one. So Simone de Beauvoir, again, a contemporary and intellectual, and in other ways partner of Sartre, Jean-Paul Sartre, is talking about the useful embrace of ambiguity. She's rejecting absurdity as perhaps not a helpful concept, but she says meaning must constantly be one. We must work on it. And one of my all-time favorite existentialist quotes is, life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forward, by Soren Kierkegaard. So I will finish with some more reading. You'll have seen any number of book covers offered during the presentation, which will be available afterwards as well. And I do advocate, along with discussion and connection with other human beings around, community and connection and caring and exploration, the practice of bibliotherapy, if you like, which is, there's a lot of succor, a lot of support and comfort that can be offered, from books, and a lot of insight. The humanist tradition over 700 years, or arguably for many thousands of years, we went back to Kongzi, Confucius, and others from thousands of years ago, is about a human tradition of collecting wisdom and really shared insights into the human condition. So a couple of Sarah Bakewell titles there she wrote, which I read with great joy 6 or so years ago at the Existentialist Cafe, which is about Sartre, de Beauvoir, who we've met, Camus, and others, and Humanly Possible we've spoken about, and yeah, many others worth reading, plenty of really very helpful introductory texts. I quite like A Life Worth Living, which is about Camus and the quest for meaning. But whatever one reads and whatever one can share, I think there's a lot of joy and a lot of insight on offer. You already know about me. We've spoken about Humanists Australia, and there are some links there. Certainly, if you aren't already connected on Facebook, on Meetup, and have discovered the Humanists Australia website, then please have a look and join us in ongoing community and conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Akiva, for presenting a very difficult topic with such clarity and enthusiasm and passion. So thank you once again. For those of you who want to ask questions or make a comment, please use the reaction button, raise your hand, and I'll get to you in turn. But perhaps I can start off, Akiva. One of my interests, as you know, is about authoritarian governments, and you mentioned before that that the choices we make are contingent upon us, and this is what comes through very strongly in the literature. But I would like to sort of pose a bit of an issue with that, because where we are born, where we live, provides the context about the decisions we make, and that's a contingency as well, a contingency factor that I think we need to factor in to when we're sort of generalising about people making personal choices. And also, I guess, in answer to my own question, Viktor Frankl, and I was quite moved when I read his book about the Holocaust and being in concentration camps, that he was able to, within those confined boundaries, he was still able to make choices, and that struck me as quite important. But nevertheless, I think that there needs to be, and I'm happy for you to debate or argue with me, there needs to be some recognition that the context is important, that it's not, we simply can't make the decisions we want willy-nilly without reference to the society that we live in.
No, thank you, Vince. Agree wholeheartedly with that. Context is everything. What people perhaps aren't always fully aware of and reflective about is that even in a purportedly open and free and democratic society, such as in Australia and other democracies where those freedoms are very much valued, and democracy is a core humanist value as well, as you were saying, Vince. Even in those societies, we're socialized in a whole lot of ways. So I was fortunate enough to have some years and to have continued in the study of philosophy for most of my adult life. I also spent more than a handful of years studying sociology. So, we've got primary socialization. Everyone knows about the importance of parents and mentors and close kind of guides within one's immediate circle. Then we've got kind of secondary socialization through kind of a broader community and so on. And then people even talk about, the third level, tertiary socialization, by the broader kind of assumptions of society, being it a sort of a so-called Christian, ethos or ethic or whatever. So yeah, and that's in a relatively free society, in a autocratic society, facing poverty, facing conditions of war, which sadly all too many people are facing as we speak. Under an authoritarian leader, your choices are severely, in some cases, limited. However, yes, Frankel, writing, within or from the experience of, being in a concentration camp, everything can be taken from someone. I think it's also a Nietzsche quote that he actually brings in his Man's Search for Meaning, except the ability to choose, which basically means how you respond to the circumstances. So, yeah, totally agree. And that's why life is difficult, even with relative freedom. You don't have so many freedoms that you can just create yourself any way you wish. We tend to all have, commitments and expenses and all the rest of it. So no, that brings a real world praxis, as I would call it, a kind of practical reality to any of these, thoughts about who we want to be in life, constrained, of course, by circumstances. And I think that ties in beautifully, just to finish with, it ties in beautifully with the notion of being thrown into existence, because we're also thrown into particular circumstances, which we, by definition, don't choose. As a teenager or beyond, you might choose to change some of those circumstances, but you've already been, well taught what perhaps you should do in life. So thanks, Vince. Very thoughtful question.